today to be interactive. We want you to speak to us, to get involved in our sessions, and also talk to each other. So feel free to reach out to us, to other people that are attending today, and to our speakers. So let's begin, shall we? So let's pass this over to Ruairi, who will be introducing our first session.
Thanks, Mel, and thanks a million for having us, and kind of welcome everyone. And for those who I haven't met, I'm Ruairi Kelleher, the CEO of Immedis. So the topic that we're going to discuss today alongside Ivan from Ceridian is, is global payroll set up to impact the bigger business picture? And I think we're going to dive into this, and what I think is becoming more and more topical is, how can payroll become a bigger and bit more important part in how organizations view their operations and scale their businesses? As we all know on this call, payroll is critical to the success of any organization. So trying to understand how it can become more impactful is kind of where we're going to go today. Alongside Mel and the GPA, we did run a survey earlier this year to understand some key focus areas. And now if we move in terms of the demographic that we looked at, and some of the key focus points that we're looking to go through today. So from a demographic perspective, we looked at a wide-ranging group. So as you can see there, country coverage, we looked at 62% of the respondents were in more than 11 countries, so giving a real true global view. 55% represented organizations at more than 2,500. So, have challenges of both scale and size across multiple jurisdictions. From a job role perspective, we were really interested in understanding from a payroll manager or higher, so people who can directly influence organizational behavior. And from a reporting line, one that doesn't surprise me is kind of a 50-50 split almost between HR and finance, which in itself I think is a really interesting narrative to have as to how those decisions differ depending on where the reporting line goes. So when we looked at the key focus areas, really was around the scalability. So, the global payroll operations itself and what type of vendor relation we have from a global perspective, the technologies that we use to enable or that are used to enable, the best in class experience, the access to payroll information and knowledge, and then ultimately, which is becoming increasingly more important and local, is the employee experience. So, a huge amount of data was collected, some really interesting insights, some of which were expected, some unexpected. So Mel, perhaps I'll hand back to you to share it from here on in and ask Ivan and myself whatever questions.
Thanks, Ruairi. So I've been told off actually because I kept saying the word surprising every time I looked at these results. And when I wrote up the review of these results, a number of people said to me, "You've got to stop using the word surprising." So on this one, though, I am going to start off with the word surprising. So Ivan, we asked how much you use Excel within sort of payroll processing and data analysis. And it came up at 71%. And I think we can all agree that we all found that result, and I'm sorry to say, surprising. Is this result higher than you would have expected? And why do you think it is so high?
So being in the payroll industry, software, more than 20 years, we always say that our main competition is Excel. To be clear, because everyone can use Excel, everyone can think that they can calculate payroll. And I remember I will not mention the name, of course, of the customer, but I had a customer, a prospect customer actually, that work with us now, that tell me, "Ivan, why would I pay payroll for a country where I can do it on Excel?" And I can give some example, like, you take the Caribbean countries, which are known for simple payroll. So why would I pay for that? And then the answer is, you do whatever you want. But and it's back to the question, using Excel is easy. You can probably do a lot of things besides reporting. You can do calculation, etc. But you have a real big problem of liability, security, role-based access, and everything which is around the solution itself. That's the reason why we're here. That's the reason why we are providing secure way of calculating payroll, stay compliant, etc. So that's one of the elements. So no surprise here. But still, still a limited approach about where we can use Excel to process payroll, definitely.
Yeah, and are there any risks attached to this, Ruairi or Ivan? This goes to either one of you.
Yeah, most certainly. No, it's echo coming back. Sorry. Yeah, it's not surprising because we see it all the time, and one of the pieces that we offer in our software is the ability to transport out of it or import into or export into Excel. There's different reasons, so from a risk perspective, if you're using Excel to actually ship data around the world, there's certain inherent risks if you're passing Excels byte encrypted or passcoded. Even if it's via email, it's far from ideal to be holding that much employee data and secure information in that sort of a format. I understand why organizations will use Excel for post-payroll analysis. Excel is a very good tool, but I think payroll has moved on so greatly, and specifically on a global standpoint, to use Excel on a global scale is, incredibly dangerous from an accuracy perspective around reporting. And from a security standpoint, in terms of shipping data, definitely has significant risks. So, whilst Ivan said, Excel is, it's a tool that's been around a long time. It's highly adaptive, but that adaptability can cause issues as well.
Yeah, just looking at the audience, and I think people have said no surprise, but extremely sad. So I think maybe some of these people felt the way that we did when we saw the results. Okay, so let's just go on to the next slide. So I wondered, we ran this question actually for the first time in this survey, and I wondered what you guys thought about the answers. So we asked, what is your current payroll close date for all data inputs and changes? So we had 15% plus was 11.7%, 11 to 14 days is 22.9%, 7 to 10 days, 26.4%, and then we've got under 6 days, 39%. So I just wondered, does this mean that over 39% takes longer than 6 days? Does this mean that the data isn't real-time data when you're actually processing the payroll? What are the issues with having a longer sort of pay date? Ivan, over to you. Have you got any thoughts on this?
Oh, yes. Many thoughts on this one. Actually, that's all about the way you're processing payroll. And we can even go back to the Excel example. When I'm on Excel, well, I can do immediately, and I can have immediately my results, which means that I'm responsible for what I'm doing. But at the moment you're processing payroll in-house, that's probably corresponding to the under 6 days, which is 39% are processing payroll in-house, or they have a SaaS system they're doing themselves because they have the knowledge of the country where they're running payroll. But at the moment, you're giving the key to somebody else. So to Ceridian, to Immedis, to somebody who is processing payroll, there is a transfer of responsibility. And at the moment there is a transfer of responsibility, well, the person in charge need more time to do it because they want to be sure that the data are correct and are correctly processed. So it's not anymore real time, it's not anymore 6 days, it could take longer because sometimes you need to go locally and check with a local, what we call ICP, the in-country provider. So there's a time frame is different, and companies are more and more aware about it and needs to adapt the way they are paying people based on that. So that's the trend anyway.
Because you actually answered one of my questions there. Is it because more people, the next survey result actually is a combination of this, but do you think this is because people are using more in-country payroll providers that maybe it is a longer time frame?
That's exactly it. That instead of having one actor, which is me, Ivan, running payroll in France because I've got my own system, now I'm running global payroll in X numbers of countries, and I need to go on another time zone, and I need to go with somebody else, or I need to go through Immedis and with the local ICP or Ceridian, and all these steps, which are good, outsourcing payroll mean that the time frame is getting longer. Yeah.
Okay, right, so I've sort of given away what the next one's going to be about, but let's go on to this. So we have asked this question before, Ruairi, in a previous survey that we ran with you guys. It hasn't changed much, and again, this was another topic, or sorry, another surprise, that there was over 44% of people who are who use ICPs use between 5 to 101 plus. Did that make sense what I just said then? So over 44% of people use more than 5 and even over 100 ICPs to process their payrolls. So that's a huge figure, isn't it, Ruairi?
Yeah, it is a massive figure, and it plays back to the slide the last time in terms of the cutoff dates. And so if you've got multiple SLAs, multiple operating models, like, you've built an incredible amount of inefficiency into the process, and now you've got to manage it almost from the lowest common denominator. You've got to manage it from its weakest point. You know, the cutoff dates, not to allude back to the previous slide, the cutoff dates do have a relative piece to how you're paying your employees. So depending on what the bank mandate that you're using to pay can obviously stretch that out. But the biggest piece is the inefficiency to validate and collect data from a centralized HCM, which a lot of the people I'm sure on this call have. So, you know, it's incredibly inefficient to have, you know, centralized source of truth for the majority of your core HR data, and then parse that and separate it into a multitude of different capabilities on the downstream side. And to me, that just creates a huge amount of inefficiencies, a huge amount of inaccuracies, and causes a lot of time spent on pain interacting with the vendor and the ultimate customer, just trying to get the data validation right. And it's a huge amount of frustration, I'm sure, is spent in that process, where, you know, if you can have a single technical solution and a single operating model, it should be able to be far more efficient. Like, you know, I always say it, you wouldn't have 5 to 100 plus HR systems, and you wouldn't have 5 to 101 plus finance systems to do a global company. Why would you have 100 plus payroll systems? Like, when that the link is natural.
Mel, you're on mute.
Sorry, just to play, that's another thing that we say now, isn't it? You're on mute, that's just all the time. But but Ivan, you know, just to play devil's advocate, are there any advantages at all to having numerous vendors, maybe not 101 or 50 or whatever, but are there any advantages at all?
So is there any advantages? I mean, let me do people that know me know that I love to do analogy. So let me do an analogy with food, because I'm French, so I'm a foodie. I think it will not come to my mind to say I want to have one restaurant when I will find Italian, Chinese, and Thai food in the same place. So what do I mean by that? I mean that many companies think that they are special. And for this reason, they will go to the local level and say, you know what, I'm special. My population is special. So I want this provider in Spain because it's the only one that can take care of me. So the one-stop shop is still not a mindset for many payroll professional, and even, I'm sorry, not payroll professional, CFO or CHRO don't have in mind that, yes, you can go to a company and this company will find the special payroll provider in the country. So there is some reason you can find some local provider because, well, maybe you think you're special, but I mean, I'm convinced that it's not true. And normalization, centralization is probably the way you should go, whatever country you're in. You're still on mute, Mel. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. No, I'm not going to put myself on mute anymore. Ruairi, do you have anything to add at all?
No, I think Ivan has got it really well there. I think, you know, it is around, it's understanding what the underlying, you know, what you would go back to what the topic of this discussion is, like, you know, how does payroll enable kind of global strategy and pieces? Like, you know, having a really decentralized model of payroll when you've got a centralized model and everything else would create frustrations in the process and not be able to give that value add the payroll should be giving to the organization at the highest level.
Okay, so going on to the next result. So again, I think we've been asking this question for like 15 years, and that sort of goes to show how long I've been in payroll and how old I'm getting now. But it's been asked on so many occasions. Is there a single payroll provider who can handle all of the payroll needs globally? And I know, I think I was thinking about this morning on the train into London. I reckon it must have been about 15 years ago when one software provider made an announcement that they were going to go global, and then I think they gave up after a couple of years. But then also the other results, which goes nicely with the other result, is how important is achieving global payroll delivery through a single vendor. So, it's pretty much 86% of it is somewhat important. And then you've got, on the, is there a single vendor, 42.4% said yes. So that hasn't really changed. I think it's always been, like 50-50 throughout the years. Is there one? So, Ivan, do you believe that there is a truly, there is a one global payroll provider? And do you agree that, with the 46% or 86, shall I say, that it is very important?
So it's funny because everything is around the way you ask the question. Let me be more clear. If you say, is there any software that can run payroll in 190 countries in the world, your answer is no. But the way the question is asked is there a single vendor that can provide payroll globally? The answer is yes. Because if for a country where the system is not able, the engine is not able to run payroll, then they will use a third party to do it. And you can use a single platform to consolidate the value. So absolutely, you can use a single vendor to do this kind of task. I think that's the reason why we still have 42% of people that saying yes. But again, the idea is to say, don't expect that you will find the software, the Excel, the payroll Excel, that will run payroll in a single touch point in all the countries in the world. No, that's not true. It's not true for many reasons, because of just economic reason. Would I really develop a software to run payroll in the Vatican for the population that I've got there? No, but I probably use a local payroll provider to do it. So you see, and I'm using on purpose a small, really, really small niche, but that's the kind of question. I just had a question last week. Do you have a payroll? Can you provide payroll with Dayforce in Andorra? Well, no, but I'm working with Ruairi to find a partner that I can use to run payroll in Andorra, and we will use a platform to be able to provide a service there.
So that leads me nicely on to my next question to Ruairi, actually. So one of the things I've noticed over the last 12 to 18 months are that there are more global payroll providers partnering with each other, which I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that they wouldn't necessarily be so open about, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Is that a trend that's happening now? Is that a better option to provide a global payroll solution?
I'm not sure how. Obviously, like ourselves, it's really have a very good partnership, and it's around being able to deliver the best service and technology for a customer's needs. Like, I think it's really important. Like, global payroll, like, it's a big term, and it's like it covers a wide spread of different types of customers. Like, the solution for having 50 people in 12 countries versus 5,000 people in 20 countries is different, and your requirements. So, it's about combining the technology and the service element to it. So, it's really important, and I think that's what we do well. It's combining that kind of expertise and being able to understand the SME, the subject matter expertise on the global payroll kind of tax specific side, and combining that with the technologies that allow for a standard operating process. Because in large scale companies, if you have 25 different ICPs or 40 different ICPs, it is nigh on impossible to have a standard operating process, because you've got so many different multiple touch points, you've got different SLAs, you've got multiple agreements. And as I mentioned earlier, and as Ivan said really well, like the requirement for an ICP in the Vatican is going to be different to the requirement of maybe one in Germany, where the headcount's different, and the importance of you to them differs. Where, if you have that global consolidation specifically at scale, it allows an organization to be more efficient. It's not about just reporting. It's actually around being efficient in your data validation, your data management, but also in terms of being able to impart a standard operating process globally for the customer.
If you don't mind, I would like to have one comment, because actually there is a great question in the chat. It's not in the Q&A, it's not, but it's in the chat. This is fine, which is, I mean, we talk about a single vendor, but the question is, do we want to put all our eggs in the same basket? I love it. Well, and you talk about the trend, and you talk about 15 years ago. And you know what? 15 years ago, when you were implementing a payroll software, it was taking you between, let's say, 4 months and 2 years, just for, I mean, several countries, which means that the investment was so high that, well, the eggs in the same basket mean that you have, it's a risky game, because after that, if you want to change, it takes so much time to change. Now, the way we are providing the solution is, and we'll talk about that in the rest of the survey, is cloud-based. Mean that, first of all, it's cloud-based and it's a subscription. So you are not engaged anymore to the provider. It's not, I'm sorry, I'll do another analogy. It's not the Apple ecosystem. You can change and go back to Android if you want. And it's exactly the same thing here, when, yes, you're tied to your vendor, but only for a period of time, which is 3 years, the majority of the case could be 5 years, but that's it. After that, the engagement is shorter, the investment is lower. So yes, you can put your eggs in the same basket, because after that, it's easy to change basket.
I like the food analogy. keep them coming. So onto the next one. So again, Ruairi, this is not a surprise, these results. And actually, one of the reasons the GPA began was because of compliance and people trying to find answers. So this one we asked what were the top 3 focus areas of improvement relating to the payroll provider services. So we had compliance, accuracy, and reporting capability. And I know from the results they were all pretty, even. Ruairi, why is it such a challenge? Why every time we run a survey, compliance, I can tell you, I could not even look at the survey results and I will tell you that compliance is top, accuracy is the next thing, and then reporting. Why is it such a challenge?
Well, it really depends on what people mean by compliance. I'm going to guess it means like around the payroll compliance as opposed to the data compliance more so. And it's kind of back to Ivan's point. The global payroll across like 150, 180 countries is compliant. It's challenging. And that's why it's uneconomical to build a single platform that would be able to deliver like a sort of single engine. It's difficult, it's complex, it can be case specific. So, from an employee, understanding how pay elements operate for certain companies under certain rules, in certain industries, it differs so greatly. So, from a global payroll perspective, compliance and understanding the accuracy of payroll, like to me, they're intrinsically linked. It can only be accurate if it's compliant. And payroll, back to its basics, is accurate on time. So understanding, and specifically now, like as the workforce becomes more global, becomes more flexible, you've got more and more nuanced compliance requirements around whether it's BIK, whether it's not BIK, for example, whether, tax residency because we've got a remote worker, and how those are all treated. Obviously, the penalties are so significant. And that compliance, I think if you ask this question in 100 years, regardless of what technology comes, it's still going to be the number one, because it is the backbone as to what payroll actually is.
I think some of the issues that we found on the GPA side is that when people have contracted with vendors, they're expecting to be updated on legislation for the compliance, but they haven't actually got that in their contract, so that they all of a sudden get a penalty where they're assuming that they will be told about a certain deadline, and they're not found, that doesn't happen. So I think that's one of the key areas, maybe at the contracting side when you're looking at a new vendor.
Yeah, how it's managed, I think, is critical. Like, if organizations are waiting for, like, a Word document that states changes in compliance regulations, like, to actually impact that change is really difficult, and it creates headaches and it creates errors because it's very manual. So you need to have like a country-specific data framework that manages it all, that allows organizations to get it right first time. It's not reliant on the organization or the customer to understand or implement the change. It should be your payroll vendor that understands that detailed country-specific pay element required and report that back.
Mm-hmm. Ivan, I don't know if you've got anything that you wanted to add before we move on.
Just really fast. I mean, completely aligned with Ruairi. I think and actually Mary makes some comment also around the compliance, which completely makes sense. I think one of the elements which is related to compliance and accuracy is communication. And we just mentioned it several times, but I mean, that's one of the key elements, meaning that compliance is a big word because it say a lot of things and not a lot of things, but everything is around the interpretation of the law. I mean, my God, being a French guy, knowing French payroll, I can tell you, I mean, you can have variation about the way you're reading the regulation itself. And after that, it's the way you're communicating so as a vendor, to your payroll professionals, so to your customers. And after that, from the payroll vendor to for the payroll expert, to the employee himself. So there's all the communication is a key element. So it's starting with us communicating to our customers. This is what we understand about the compliance, and this is the way you would like to need to treat it.
Thank you, Ivan. Just go on to the next slide. So I think this is where I'm a little bit naive. So when we set up the GPA, we set up straight away using the cloud system, and we actually ran a short keynote speech about the cloud. And at the time, this was about 10 years ago, people were like, no, rubbish, that was a really bad session. And then obviously things have changed. So let's just have a look at this. So does your organization use a cloud-based human capital management solution? So 66.7% said yes. So Ivan, what does this tell us? Do we have some way to go, or is this a positive figure?
It's funny because that's the way I'm reading the metrics. They say, oh my God, we still have some way to go because there are 33% that don't have an cloud HR system, or using an on-premise solution, or maybe doesn't have anything centralized, which is wow. To Ruairi's point, when you talk about, data set, the fact that we need to have something which is predefined. I mean, to be clear, global payroll needs a start, and most of the time it's coming from an HCM solution. So it's good. We are really definitely going the right way with the 66%, but we have some way to go with the 33% that are still not, equipped with a system.
Yeah. So this was one of I've got staggering because I've changed it from surprising to staggering that only 33% have a cloud-based payroll solution in place. So Ruairi, does this surprise you like it does me? It's not just me that it's staggered. I need to stop using the word surprise. And why is the figure so low? Is it because payroll professionals are afraid of adopting a cloud-based payroll solution, or what's the reason? What do you think the reasons are behind this figure?
I think that there's obviously, without shirking the question, there's a multitude of reasons. I think the migration to a cloud-based global payroll should be behind the migration to a cloud-based HCM, because by migrating to a globalized HCM system, that is the single biggest true enabler of global payroll. So if payroll was ahead of HR, I think it would be upside down. But I think it's around the levels of importance in the organization. I think when we talk about where does payroll sit, like 50% of the respondents were that it reports into HR. So the HR decisions are always going to trump the payroll decisions, and so the HCM investment will come first. I think organizations are really I think that number is going to catch up really quickly. We see the shift to it happening like at a much greater pace than we ever have. The people are now trying to leverage the investment they've made in HCM within payroll. Because I think it refers to the graph on the right, 50% are integrated but have manual intervention. And in global payroll, the manual intervention has to happen because all of the pay elements in global will never be housed in the HCM suite, or very rarely. So the ability to have a cloud-based payroll system that complements your HCM is a big shift in the market. So I would hope that we wouldn't be staggered in a couple of years' time, because I think that gap is closing quickly.
So we've had a couple of situations where we've had our members contact us because they've some don't have payroll experience, but they're more on the HR side, and they've implemented HCM system and then they've forgotten about payroll. So I don't know if anybody's had this situation that's on today's session, and then all of a sudden they've got to think about payroll. How do they get that involved into this project? Ivan, how do we get payroll to get there into this, to get there in the front of these projects, so that they get involved into the HCM, and what do they actually need to do to be there at the front?
Well, the thing is, there's many reasons. One of them is either around the investment itself. And I see some comments mention it. When we talk about a cloud-based system for HCM, yes, it's an investment. Of course, it's a needed investment. That's the reason why now we are 66%. And to get payroll there, we need to give the same argument that is used for HCM, meaning that it's a more secure way of storing your information. It's a better way, the better approach to get your information clearly. It's everything around certification, around even compliance. So it's to show that long-term there is an ROI. I know the word could be sometime an insult for some people, but let's be clear, it's an ROI, meaning that the fact that you're managing 15 ICPs means that you've got resource to do it, and that you're taking some risk. There is an enterprise risk, which means that there's a cost. So investing in a cloud payroll system will solve this risk and will reduce the cost. And so, long story short, ROI is one of the key elements, and it's something that needs to be considered part of the equation.
Is it like talking figures to the important people? Talking to things that, talking about what the return would be to those people in charge. Sort of. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes. No, sorry. So yeah. No, definitely. Again, the return is. Again, when we talked about, I would say the subscription, the SaaS model, the way we are contracting, as I mentioned, the idea is a contract between 3 years, 5 years. And actually what we see with our customer is that the ROI is even shorter, meaning that when they have 5 people managing 60 ICPs and they went back to 1, which is Ceridian or Immedis, well, you look like, yes, now the people that were doing that before now are doing something which is a lot more smarter and are more investing on doing things that are more critical to the company, which means that the ROI is, from the study that we've got with customer, is a lot shorter than the 3 years. It's between 1 year, sometimes even smaller, depending on what the investment is made and how countries they are going after.
So now we have our technology issue that the slides have come off. So it's always the way. But I'm going to go on to while Hayley sorts that out for us, I'm going to go on to, are we going to get them up? There you go. So this, again, I changed the word from surprising to revealing. So the next one that we had is, how do you currently access payroll reports and analytics? So we had real-time 31%. This is really bizarre that they're all like 31%, but real-time 31%, dashboard access to relevant reports, 31% service provider delivers part of the service, 31% manual consolidation of reports, and 7% service provider delivers when requested. And the question that complements this, I think, is how long does it typically take to produce a global payroll related report? And then we have like 19% with 1 week plus. Over 41% is more than 1 day. So Ruairi, do you find these results surprising? And Is it the complexity of payroll the reason why it takes so long to get a report, and also how to actually get a report? So, where you look at the manual consolidation.
It is surprising to me. It's probably not surprising when you lay it back to how many people have like the cloud, or a centralized global payroll service on the cloud. But outside of statutory reports which need to be delivered by a provider, like there should be no reason why every report shouldn't be live and self-service, like instantaneously. There should be instant access for you should be able to report against every single pay element, every single type of report. You should be able to slice and dice it as is required by your organization. You shouldn't be reliant on you shouldn't be reliant on static reports that are kind of a serve all. You should be able to have a reporting tool within your global payroll layer that allows you to access whatever you want when you want it. So, it's, as I mentioned at the start, outside of, the very, statutory static reports that you should receive from your provider as part of your monthly pack, everything else should be instantly accessed. And you should be able to do it at any part of the cycle, to be able to look and validate information, look at the different pay element components, look at different, and like the GL config, it should be all configurable in the same platform and available instantaneously. So while it's not necessarily surprising, if you link it back to the number of people, respondents are actually using the central report, it's definitely not necessary.
You're on mute, Mel.
Sorry. I always put it on mute for Ruairi just in case there's anyway. So do you think that the reason for this is that the payroll professionals aren't shouting out enough to demand reports to be delivered more quickly? Is it down to the providers that they're not being responsible, or is it the payroll professionals not shouting out enough? Is it because they're happy with what they've got and then they just deal with it and make sure everything's processed on time, blah, blah, blah? What do you think, Ivan or Ruairi?
I can take the first shot here. So I think it's corresponding to the other question earlier, which is how many are using a centralized system for payroll? I mean, I'm 100% with Ruairi on what he said, which is it should be instantaneous. It should be a centralized way of having the information. That's the way. It's the way we are providing it at Ceridian. Ruairi and Immedis are doing the same thing. Actually, we are working together on that. That's the goal, and that's a goal for all countries we are serving. So when we look at the other way of getting information, it's definitely because there is no centralization. It's definitely because there is what we've seen in the conversation there, where people are still using 15 ICP. Mean that if it's an ICP, it's local SLAs, it's local. I mean, even SOW mean that, you will probably need to pay this ICP to get the report because it's not part of the services and it's something specific. So that's all the question around how much can I get access to my data, and definitely it's back to a single vendor. The single vendor will make sure that you've got your information on time for all the things that matters. And of course, as Ruairi mentioned, I'm not talking about compliant statutory report where it should be taken care of automatically without even considering it. We are really talking about a payroll professional that would like to run a report globally. Here, that should be instantaneous.
Ruairi, I don't know if you've got anything to add before we move on to the next question.
Yeah, like if you can't report instantaneously, that means the system you're using doesn't hold the data in a granular level and doesn't have the competencies to report. If the system you're using has the proper data validation tool sets that unpacks the data into structured format, you should be able to report anything you want, anytime you want. But if you can't do that, that means that there's a lot of manual intervention happening in the background.
Okay. So we're just coming to our final two here. So how do employees currently update their payroll-related information? So there still seems to be a lot of manual process happening here. We've got contact a member of HR or payroll, dedicated mailbox. So what needs to be done here, Ruairi? How do we improve this figure?
get rid of the mailbox would be one. If you leave it there for people to use, they would use it. I'd imagine like the 51%, I'm guessing, is predominantly through the HCM. And I think that's about enabling. So, you know, we always hear these challenges where the payroll system of record and the HCM system of record differ. And so that's a lack of synchronization between the systems as to what is the system of the source of truth for what particular pay element. So what we would use a lot of the time in terms of, you know, supplementing the pay element related data on a country level is to use the UI within the payroll platform, the global payroll platform, to have it as a source record to store all of the non-core HR data that doesn't come. So you're allowing the employee to update and self-serve both on a core HCM level, but also on a payroll specific and a payment level. And I think if companies can embrace that sort of dual aspect where there's only a single source of truth on a pay element basis as opposed to an overall perspective, it will really enhance the employee experience and accuracy.
Okay, and Ivan, just before we come to our final one, do you think there's some resistance from the payroll community to adopt automation and new technology?
I mean, resistance, I probably don't see it at the payroll level, but it's happened in the past that I heard some CFO, CHRO saying that, well, we don't want to deploy the service because we are not sure about what we are deploying. So again, it's always back to the question of trust, about communication, about what data is accessible. Is it the good data that I'm sharing with my employees? So as long as the data are the good one, I mean, I think the adoption is growing really fast. And when I say growing very fast, growing fast everywhere in all continents. I mean, it's true. I see some comments about the bandwidth, about accessing the cloud data and reports. I mean, it should not be a struggle anymore. I mean, and I've seen adoption now in countries where we're considered that the data were not good, accessing mobile and say, yeah, I'm on my mobile, I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I still get access to my payslip. So it's really the trend, and I think there is a lot less resistance than in the past. And again, I never saw resistance on the payroll professional level. It was always at the upper level. The CFO or CHRO would say, oh, I don't trust this technology. Now we're getting rid of that.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm mindful of time. I think we've finished this off quite nicely. So I'm not necessarily going to ask your opinions on this unless you want to say something. But this is a subject that I think we could almost like run a webinar on its own. And we've run a roundtable with Ceridian on this subject about on-demand pay. Do you have any plans to implement it? So it seems to be a really contentious subject. I feel that on-demand pay is going to be coming to us our way soon. There's obviously legislation that needs to be considered to implement it. Before we finish, do you guys have anything that you want to say on demand pay at all?
Very briefly, I think we as you mentioned, you can discuss the pros and cons and the ethics of different things, but I think one thing for sure is that it's coming. So companies are going to have a demand from their employees. So they need to actually be prepared and understand what the implications are and make decisions on a corporate level as to how they're going to tackle it, because it is definitely something that's coming.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so just to say thank you for joining us today and sharing your knowledge.